In today's episode, we'll dive into the story of the Winter Soldier.
You have a metal arm? That is awesome!
Bucky Barnes is one of the few Marvel characters who's been active since Phase 1 and is still going strong. As a supporting hero tied closely to a main Avenger, his character arc is arguably second only to Loki's in terms of depth and emotional weight. Bucky's journey can be divided into several key phases. His World War II days in Captain America, the first Avenger. His time as the Winter Soldier in the Winter Soldier and Civil War. His healing phase as the White Wolf in Wakanda. His redemption arc in the Falcon and the Winter Soldier. And his current role as a government operative in Captain America 4 and Thunderbolts. Since his story spans across so many films and shows, we'll be covering it in a series of videos. Alright, let's jump into the beginning. Bucky's full name is James Buchanan Barnes. He was born in Brooklyn in 1917. As a kid, he became best friends with Steve Rogers, who was a year younger and a lot smaller. Bucky was his nickname, and only people close to him like Steve would call him that.
Hey, Bucky!
So when guys like Sam or Walker casually called him Bucky later on, yeah, he wasn't too happy about it.
You can't call me that. Why not? That's what Steve called you. Steve knew me longer, and Steve had a plan.
Steve was frail growing up, and Bucky always looked out for him. In 1936, after Steve's mother passed away, Bucky was right there with him at the funeral. He even offered Steve a place to stay, but Steve, being stubborn as ever, insisted on managing things by himself.
You don't have to. I'm with you to the end of the line, pal.
In 1943, the two tried to enlist together. But let's be honest, Steve's medical record was longer than my childhood Christmas list, so of course he got rejected. Not long after that, Steve got into trouble for standing up to a loudmouth jerk in a movie theater. The guy cornered Steve and started beating him up, until Bucky showed up just in time to save him. That bully? Yeah, Bucky made sure he regretted it. When Bucky found out Steve was still trying to enlist using fake papers, he was kind of helpless about it. Bucky had already joined the army and been promoted to sergeant. He was shipping out to fight in Europe the next day, but he came to invite Steve to a farewell party. That night, they headed to the Stark Expo. Yes, that's Stark, Tony's dad. Being the thoughtful guy he is, Bucky even brought two girls along to cheer Steve up. Let's be honest, Bucky really was the kind of friend anyone would want. Just as he was trying to pull Steve onto the dance floor, he turned around, and Steve was gone. Turns out Steve still hadn't given up on joining the army. Bucky wasn't too thrilled about it. War was brutal, and with Steve's body, the chances of survival were close to zero.
Bucky, come on, there are men laying down their lives. I got no right to do any less than them.
Steve didn't change his mind, so Bucky left him to it.
Don't do anything stupid until I get back.
How can I? Taking all the stupid with you.
Before parting ways, Bucky gave Steve a military salute, never realizing that their conversation had been overheard by a certain scientist nearby. That moment would end up changing Steve's fate forever. Thanks to Dr. Erskine's recommendation, Steve was accepted into the Army and selected for the Super Soldier program. After his transformation, he became Captain America. A while later, Bucky's unit, the 107th Infantry, was ambushed. Bucky was captured and handed over to Dr. Zola for human experimentation. When Steve heard about it, he didn't hesitate. With the help of Agent Carter and Howard Stark, he went deep behind enemy lines to save his fellow soldiers. Armed with just a shield, Steve stormed the Hydra base like a one-man army. He freed every prisoner in the camp, including Bucky, who had just survived one of Zola's experiments.
I thought you were dead.
I thought you were smaller.
The two barely escaped as the base exploded behind them, and they returned to camp with all the rescued troops. That mission proved Steve wasn't just a propaganda tool, he was the real deal. And no one was more proud of him than Bucky, who led the cheers for his best friend. Later on, Bucky and Steve teamed up with a few other elite soldiers they rescued and formed the Howling Commandos. Let's be real, most of them signed up just to fight alongside Captain America.
You ready to follow Captain America into the jaws of death?
Hell no. That little guy from Brooklyn who was too dumb not to run away from a fight. I'm following him.
Now, normally, when the guy you've protected all your life suddenly becomes way stronger than you, and strong enough to protect you, most people would feel jealous or insecure. But not Bucky, not even for a second. He was genuinely happy for Steve. But as we all know, good times don't last forever. Bucky kept following Steve into mission after mission until that day. During a mission to capture Dr. Zola, things went south. An energy weapon blast threw Bucky off the train. Steve tried everything to save him, but Bucky fell off the cliff. Now, here's what really happened. Bucky didn't die. Because of the experiments Hydra had already done on him, he survived the fall. Soviet troops found him, but unfortunately so did Hydra agents hiding among them. Meanwhile, after Steve crashed his plane into the Arctic and was frozen, the world moved on. Howard Stark and Peggy Carter helped establish S.H.I.E.L.D., and Zola was also brought in. Big mistake. Instead of reforming, Zola secretly used S.H.I.E.L.D. to rebuild Hydra from the inside. Zola outfitted Bucky with a metal arm, complete with a red star, and started wiping his memories through constant brainwashing. Bucky became Hydra's most lethal assassin, the Winter Soldier. Over the decades, he carried out dozens of covert missions. One of the most infamous? In 1991, he assassinated Howard and Maria Stark and stole 5 vials of the replicated super soldier serum. Yeah, Howard Stark, Tony's real father. In 2009, he assassinated a nuclear scientist, firing a shot that went straight through his bodyguard, who just so happened to be Natasha Romanoff. Hydra kept the Winter Soldier program highly classified. When he wasn't on a mission, they'd lock Bucky away in cryo, preventing him from aging. And that's how he spent the next 70 years, in and out of suspended animation, trapped in an endless nightmare. Fast forward to 2014. Steve had already been thawed out and was back in action. Thanks to a few red flags Steve noticed, Nick Fury began to suspect something was wrong within S.H.I.E.L.D. Just as he started digging deeper, former S.H.I.E.L.D. director turned World Security Council member Alexander Pierce ordered his assassination.
DC Metro Police Dispatch shows no units in this area.
Fury, driving what might be the most bulletproof SUV ever made, with working AC thankfully, barely escaped a Hydra ambush. But just when he thought he'd gotten away, a masked man stepped into the road. The Winter Soldier ripped off the car door like it was made of paper, only to find Fury had already cut a hole in the roof and escaped. But you don't just walk away from the Winter Soldier. Later that night, at Steve's apartment, Bucky tracked Fury down and shot right through the wall, hitting him critically. Steve chased after the assassin and finally caught up to him on a rooftop. By the time Cap realized what just happened, the Winter Soldier had already vanished. After more than 70 years apart, the two brothers finally stood face to face, but neither recognized the other. After Fury faked his death, Pierce tried to recruit Steve. When that failed, he labeled him a fugitive. Steve and Natasha went off-grid and dug into the mystery Fury left behind. Through an old computer housing Zola's consciousness, they discovered the truth about Project Insight, Hydra's plan to take control of the world. They barely escaped a missile strike triggered by Zola's AI. Pierce was running out of time. That night, the Winter Soldier was reawakened again. His new orders: eliminate Steve Rogers and Natasha Romanoff within 10 hours, before Project Insight launched. Meanwhile, Steve and Nat recruited Sam Wilson and captured Hydra agent Sitwell. Using Sitwell's credentials, they planned to board the helicarriers and shut Project Insight down. But just as they were about to get moving, guess who dropped in on the roof of their car?
That is a terrible, terrible idea.